Hello, I'm Donald Leggett and welcome to this edition of Share Views, brought to you by London South East. I'm joined in the studio today by Nelius De Groot, CEO of AIM-listed Emporium, a technology company providing tech solutions to drive digital advertising campaigns. Nelius is with us to discuss the latest trading statement. Greetings, Nelius.
Hi Donald, how are you?
So how did today's trading statement go?
Yeah, the initial reaction has been really positive. I think people are really impressed by the fact that there's a step change in terms of the numbers. We've also initiated coverage with our brokers this morning, FinnCap. So there's an awful lot more information out about the company, and the initial reaction has been very good.
Okay, so let's take a step back and ask you, what exactly is it that Emporium is and does? Who are you and what do you do?
Sure. Well, the most important thing to state at the beginning is we're a tech company. And what we do is we use events to drive digital marketing campaigns. So events happen all the time, and they have a real influence on consumer behaviour. But if you sort of get to the nuts and bolts about it, if you think about advertising, people have been very focused on audiences, the who, the channels, the where, and the message, the what. But the piece that people haven't really focused on is the when. And if you tie all those things together, it's about getting the right message, the right audience at the right time, on the right channel. And we're the time component of that piece.
Okay. You've got a division of the business called MporiumX. I see that how much 95% of your revenues go through MporiumX. So clearly very significant division. Tell me a little bit more about what it is and what it does.
Sure. So we announced the creation of MporiumX back in November. And it's a performance-focused division. So our core business has been working with agencies over time, the large agency networks and some of the independents. And we set up this separate division, which at the moment is really focused on two sectors. One is consumer regulation and the other is sports. And both of those are booming sectors for us. They're both very, very important. The numbers today, as I said, we're very proud of the numbers that are out there, but the trajectory in terms of growth in both of those pieces is very, very significant.
Okay, if I could turn you to your trading statement, could you sum the numbers up for me? What were the highlights?
Well, I guess the standout number is probably the 5.4 million of revenue that was posted in the first 2 months of the year.
And what's that versus?
Well, our 2018 numbers aren't out yet, so I need to be careful about what I'm talking about. Right. But if you look at 2017 numbers, our full year numbers were below 2 million.
Okay, so significant step change.
It's a very, very significant step change, and it really is that first quarter where we announced a transformative deal with a consumer regulation company called Delay, and that's been part of fueling it. But also, as I say, so is the growth of our sports business.
So have you been picking up new clients as you go? What's driving that growth?
Yeah, we have picked up new clients. We work with 3 different sports rights holders. We continue to work with the agencies as well in terms of what we're doing. But it's not really as much about expanding the number of clients we have. It's about going deeper with the ones that we're really beginning to monetize. So as a relatively small company, you always have to pick and choose between going broad or going deep with your clients. And certainly we're trying to work more closely with our key clients at the moment.
So in terms of current trading, you say you're trading in line with expectations. If I could drill down on that a little bit, what does the future hold? The growth was good. Will growth continue to be as good in the next 6 months?
Yeah, I think to tie all that together, I think if people look at Q1 and the statement that we've made today, if you look at the forward trajectory, I think it's absolutely right to look at that and to extrapolate forward from there. It's more difficult looking back at historic numbers for the reasons that I explained. But again, I think the growth in consumer regulation is a really important space. It's a really fascinating sector. Consumers are getting a lot more savvy about their rights in terms of what they should be able to claim when the services that they buy aren't delivered appropriately. Regulators are taking a much more aggressive stance. And really our sweet spot is this high-value lead generation that we can drive in the consumer regulation space and other sectors.
So what differentiates you?
So as I was saying earlier, and it may seem strange, if you think about those 4 components of advertising, who, what, where, and when, nobody's focused on when. And to really boil it down, what we do is we take these real-world events And whether it's a goal being scored in a football match or an influencer posting something on Instagram, if it's a show on TV, all of those signals, all of those moments have an effect on consumer behavior. And the reality is that advertisers have never had a way of monetizing that previously. And that's the core of what we do. So I'm often asked, who are your competitors? And the reality is there are very, very few people who are out there who are focused on monetizing those moments, that when.
And off camera, you were saying that you don't rely on personal data. So let's explore that thought a little bit. You don't rely on personal data, but some of your competitors do.
Yeah, if you think about a lot of companies, technology companies who are in the ad tech space, they're very focused on targeting an individual. So we were all used to, going onto various websites. You might go onto your favorite newspaper online, and you all of a sudden see an ad for something that you searched for previously. And that targeted individual piece of advertising has become a real problem for consumers because they don't like it, they find it intrusive. But also with regulation, GDPR, etc., it's becoming increasingly important in terms of how you deal with that. What we're about is using signals that curate audiences. So when again, to go back to the previous example, when an influencer posts something on Instagram, that influencer has an audience. That signal of them posting something carries a lot of information. The influencer themselves, but also the message that they post. And what that does is it creates an effect with an audience. And we monetize that effect with that audience. So we're using signals to target audiences as opposed to people using cookies to target individuals.
Interesting. In terms of the storytelling element of Emporium, let's look a little bit historically at you and say, so where did the initial funding come from? Where did the idea come from for Emporium?
Yeah, we basically launched in May 2015. We had a number of core shareholders who were very interested in how smartphones were changing consumer behavior and the opportunities that afforded technology companies, whether you were able to take advantage of that. And it was interesting in the early days because we would go out and we would explain this correlation between signals and effect, and people were very resistant. Smartphones just don't convert, people don't buy things on smartphones, etc. And within a couple of years, you saw that the vast majority of consumer purchases, especially for younger demographics, are coming via smartphones. And the really important thing to tie this together is smartphones are reactive devices. So if you're sitting at home, you're watching TV, and something appeals to you or it triggers something with you, you'll pick up your phone, you'll search for it. And that could be a program talking about a holiday destination. It could be a whole series of different things. It could be somebody wearing a fashion item that you like. So that this idea of smartphones as reactive devices and how do you monetize it, that was the core idea behind what we do. And then that developed because what we understood was that, bizarrely, the advertising industry really doesn't focus on real-world events in terms of how they modulate what they do in terms of digital campaigns. So that becomes kind of the cornerstone of what we do.
And we're looking for private retail investors here, are we? And why are you interested in private retail? Is it liquidity or what's your interest?
Well, I think first of all, broadening out the shareholder base is always good. I think retail investors are very savvy in terms of how they view companies. They view it with a different, through a different angle, different prism. Certainly, from my perspective, it's better to have a balanced portfolio. It's great to have those core shareholders that have been with you forever, but you also want to broaden out on the institutional side and on the retail side. So certainly for us, it's one of the things that we're focused on over the coming months is to broaden out our shareholder base.
And if you were to pull together what you've just explained to me, how would you sum up your investment case to those private retail investors?
Well, I guess
PIs, as we call them.
the PIs. Yeah. Okay. So I think the first thing is to look at the statement today and to use that as the base case. I mean, that's really important. The second thing is to look at the growth, I think, in consumer regulation as a sector. It's really fascinating. Sports and sports signals have a wealth of application globally. So when as happened yesterday, I guess, Spurs are playing at home for the first time. when a goal is scored there, that will have an effect. It will have an effect in terms of people wanting to stream sports. It will have an effect in terms of people wanting to buy sports gear. It will have an effect in terms of Spurs sponsors, etc. So that carries global influence.
So how can you tell the difference between any old Spurs game and then suddenly that Spurs game where they opened the new stadium and suddenly the whole of London was buzzing about that stadium opening? I saw Crystal Palace fans coming through Liverpool Street Station.
Yeah.
It was an extraordinary event. So how can you tell the difference between any old game and something that becomes an event?
Well, you led me on to the next point, which is a big part of what we do is we correlate data to historic data. We use signals and correlate them to historical data. And using that information, we're able to understand what games generate the greatest interest. But if you look at last night's example, obviously the volume of tweets around that game, leading up to that game, the amount of media interest and everything else, we're able to see whether that game is just a standard game between two London sides, which is always of more interest than some of the others, or whether it's got a specific event around it. But the real thing is, can you monetize those events? Can you monetize the consumer interest fluctuation when there's a red card, when there's a goal, when the game kicks off, when the game ends? And you also made a very interesting point, about an opportunity that I believe we have for the firm, which is you talk about, Crystal Palace fans going through tube stations. I think one of the biggest opportunities for us is digital out of home. So huge amounts of money have been spent on turning what was paper and paste into digital billboards. But those are effectively just showing carousels of ads at the moment. If you can imagine, what we can do is we can make them event-driven. So instead of those fans just seeing generic ads.
Generic stuff, yeah.
Yeah, they can see something relevant. That's a great opportunity for a broadcaster to advertise their wares, or a sports brand or sponsor. So again, this whole idea of time is really important in advertising, and nobody else is really bringing that to the fore.
It means becoming very agile and nimble. Is that possible?
Yeah, absolutely. It becomes, it's important to be agile, nimble, reactive, event-driven, but the key thing is to be able to do it at scale. And if I draw kind of a parallel, you'll be aware that some of the agencies used to set up war rooms around big events. So famously around the Super Bowl, they would have troops of people sitting there doing things in real time when the Super Bowl happened.
I've always thought people overdid the Super Bowl and underdid everything else.
Well, that's the reality. So the Super Bowl becomes this focus. But the reason why people don't do everything else is because you couldn't automate it. And that's what we really provide. We provide that ability for you to take those moments. And those moments happen all the time. And it's not just those big macro moments that are important. It's the moments throughout all different events.
Great. Absolutely fascinating. So final question, news flow. Clearly you're a busy man, clearly a busy company doing all sorts of things, great growth potential. What happens over the next 6 months, a year, in terms of news flow?
Well, I think, it's been great to get the update out today. I think that's been well received. I think we've telegraphed pretty strongly on the consumer side, and consumer regulation side, on the sports side, and our relationship with the agencies, where it's going to go in terms of news flow. So we're going to continue to focus on all of those. The other areas that we've spoken about before, digital out of home, but also potentially with broadcasters, I think are the other areas to look at.
Nelius De Groot, CEO of Emporium, thank you very much indeed for joining us today. It's been a really thought-provoking and interesting interview. Thank you so much for that. Thanks for joining us. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that from London South East, please do click on our London South East logo at the end of this video. Thank you very much indeed for watching.